Stan Houston for Church of Democratic Enlightenment. This is the fourth talk, 1D, in my series Agenda Free Speech. You are silencing them, analysing the Canadian television program Agenda Free Speech at What Cost. The subtitle of this talk, as with 1C, is Fabrication. 1C having dealt with fabrication by Professor Alice McLaughlin of York University, this talk dealing mainly with fabrication as I see it by Rachel DeCoste, community organiser, motivational speaker and Huffington Post blogger. I see the fabrication as characterising an anti-democratic radical feminism. Against DeCoste and McLaughlin, I support Professor Janice Fiamengo of Ottawa University and Justin Trottier of the Centre for Inquiry. All this is on YouTube. Fabrication, rape culture. DeCoste falsely claims, in my assessment, as with everything here, that statistics exclusively support rape culture. She says, quote, "When somebody says that the statistics that we've been based on forever are wrong, and therefore, rape is not as much of an issue as it should be, I think that draws laughter, if not crying, because it's just so preposterous." She has previously described Fiamengo's views as, quote, drivel, really just untruths, and quote, ideas that were just not based on any fact that could be backed up, close quote. Wikipedia tells us, among other things, on rape in the United States, quote, according to a March 2013 report from the US Department of Justice's Bureau of Justice Statistics, from 1995 to 2010, the estimated annual rate of female rape or sexual assault declined 58% from 5 victimisations per 1,000 females aged 12 or older to 2.1 per 1,000. Under historical trends, Wikipedia sums up, over the last 4 decades, rape has been declining. According to the National Crime Victimisation Survey, the adjusted per capita victimisation rate of rape has declined from about 2.4 per 1,000 people aged 12 and above in 1980 to about 0.4 per 1,000 people, a decline of about 85%. There are several possible explanations for this, including stricter laws, education on security for women, and a correlation with the rise in internet pornography, close quote. The accompanying graph of rape and sexual assault in 7 countries, 2003 to 2011, shows the largest declines in the rate in France and the United States from the 2 highest levels. The reliability of statistics from Brazil, Russia and India for this comparison, particularly the highest levels, I leave to listeners. It is McLaughlin who contributes the term rape culture and makes its force quite clear. Quote, if you're a rape apologist, you deny a rape culture, you say that victims of rape are responsible by their conduct or their dress or so on. Close quote. Rape culture thus involves excusing or apologising for rapists, or as DeCoste puts it, downplaying rape to be, quote, not as much of an issue as it should be, close quote. For North America, where we are considering both Canada and the US as the joint home of radical feminism, the rape culture claim is even more extraordinary, specifically in relation to the United States. Wikipedia tells us that capital punishment in the United States, quote, the United States is the only Western country currently applying the death penalty, end of quote. For the capital crime of aggravated murder, Wikipedia tells us some aggravating circumstances are nearly universal, such as robbery murder, murder involving rape of the victim, close quote. The US is uniquely anti-rape by this indicator among Western nations. Thus, what female university students are taught is that their culture condones behaviour towards them which is punishable by death. It would be surprising if they did not preemptively try to destroy men's masculinity rather than wait to be its individual victims. Rape is among the more troubled areas of jurisprudence, along with domestic violence, to which it clearly has a strong connection, and law generally related to personal relationship. Statistics will certainly show low conviction rates for rape allegations. There will be likewise similar statistics showing low reporting rates of rape. for some reasons similar to that of domestic violence. However, this didn't prevent some 20,000 women obtaining convictions for rape in 1995, according to US Department of Justice statistics in the US, my estimate on 100 million potential perpetrators. McLaughlin is equally extreme. In what is surely a most alarming version of the logic of persuasion and conviction, she suggests that because of disruption of talks where Fiamengo questions rape culture among other things, Fiamengo should reconsider her views. Fabrication, just simply citizens with opinions. The second fabrication of DeCoste that I'll deal with is an attempt to shift contemporary feminism from a radical fringe to a general centre position. She says, and Janice first talked about how it was radicals who were against her, so she's characterised people who are against her as radicals when they're just simply citizens with opinions that are offended by what she is saying. Close quote. Both McLaughlin and DeCoste contradict DeCoste in relation to disruptors who pull fire alarms. McLaughlin says no mainstream feminist, including me, none of us, are ever going to defend the pulling of a fire alarm. DeCoste says the same. I don't agree with the fire alarms pulled. DeCoste's omission of any reference to students who pull fire alarms demonstrates that her denial of the radicalism of those opposed to Fiamengo is a fabrication. The second form of exposure of the students who are against Fiamengo as radical is that they break the law. Trottier, concerned about the universities charging speakers security fees, says, quote, "You are rewarding people who are engaging in protest, sometimes law-breaking protest, where it actually does cross that line. And if we do that, we're actually sending a signal, please keep doing that, keep harassing people." Law-breaking must denote radicals, exposing DeCoste's omission of this as fabrication. Trottier extends the activities of those opposed to Fiamengo to harassing, an offence, as we know, in some forms. This further points to radicalism, though presumably short of criminality. Trottier does not stop there. Quote, "I was at these events as well. The consequences were violations of university policy, the free speech policy on the non-disruption of sanctioned events. Doors were blocked and fire alarms were pulled. That's dangerous. We can therefore add students who violate university policy, violation which extends to all disruption of sanctioned events, and students who block doors. That violation extends to all disruption would encompass the students who blow horns and beat drums. DeCoste's denial of the radicalism of those opposed to Fiamengo appears a wider and wider fabrication. Far from any of this widening of the scope of radicalism being challenged by DeCoste or McLaughlin, McLaughlin takes the other course of seeking to justify it, fully confirming its radical character. She compares the behaviour of Fiamengo's opponents with street protesters and others who use, in her words, every means possible to express the counter view and, quote, with whatever means they have. Fabrication, minorities who have never had a voice in the dominant media. The final fabrication by DeCoste I have to deal with is that social media has for the first time given minorities a public voice. Arising from the issue of Twitter mobbing, which is not a concern here, DeCoste says, quote, "There are certain people of dominant demographics who never had a place that hasn't been safe to speak until now, until the internet, until people who have never had a safe place to speak outside of the barbershop can now voice their opinions. So it's a reshifting of the playing field, and people are going to have to learn that they can't just say anything anymore. They'll have to answer for what they say, and minorities who have never had a voice in the dominant media now have a voice. So I think it's a good thing," end quote. DeCoste's claim that the internet via social media gave minorities who had never had a voice in the dominant media a voice is false, a fabrication. Facebook was launched in 2004 and Twitter in 2006. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in 1968. King's work was part of a social revolution which through the 1960s and 70s saw blacks, women and gays achieve the formal liberation of anti-discrimination law and regulation and shift in social attitude to recognition of the equal rights of all these groups. Since that social revolution, voices in the dominant media have been supportive of these minorities and increasingly have been the voices of members of these minority groups. DeCoste's claim that until now, the video of the program was published on the 13th of May 2014, there were certain people of dominant demographics who never had a place that hasn't been safe to speak until now, until the internet, is the reverse of the truth. The World Wide Web was not invented until 1990. Wikipedia, searching films about race, tells us under civil rights era, with the growth of the civil rights movement, Hollywood was on the whole on the liberal side, with films like To Kill a Mockingbird, 1962, West Side Story, 1961, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, 1967, and In the Heat of the Night, 1967, looking at race prejudice critically. DeCoste's further fabrication follows on from this. Her claim that social media gave a voice distinctively to minorities, that is, as opposed to the mainstream, is false. The minorities and the mainstream being simultaneously given a voice by social media. All this raises motive. My suggestion is that DeCoste needs to fabricate minority disadvantage because if she is not a defender of oppressed minorities, she is out of a job, someone with no following or purpose. So she fabricates minority oppression. It's not a hard thing to do using the mass media, since because people rely on the media for their view of the world, you can say whatever you like is out there and few people will check up on you. For DeCoste to acknowledge the whole population as having been equally liberated by social media would present the perspective of the whole population as having been oppressed, equally oppressed, by an elite establishment. That is exactly what DeCoste would not want because the media is one of those oppressive elites, and DeCoste, Huffington Post blogger, etc., is part of that elite. An equally oppressed population not only poses a danger of eliminating the peoples fighting among themselves that the media needs to fill its spaces, it presents the danger of a people equally oppressed deciding to rise against its elite oppressors. That would mean rising against DeCoste. The elites must keep inventing enemies among the people because the alternative enemy is the elites themselves. A peaceful, united people, equal, is the people of democracy, not what the elites would want at all. Please retweet, follow and share. Thank you.